Hey there, I'm Judy Croon. Welcome to the Judy Croon Show. My guest today, this is fantastic. Shelley Saywell. She's an award-winning Canadian documentary filmmaker whose work has been seen in more than 40 countries and recognized around the globe. Shelley has won an Emmy for investigative journalism, multiple Hot Docs awards, and has been honored with UNESCO's Gandhi Medal for promoting a culture of peace. She spent decades telling powerful stories about war, human rights, women, and children, often from the front lines. Now she's turned the camera inward with her deeply personal new memoir, If Only Love, a story of love, loss, and second chances. The book has already been named a Heather's Pick, and today we're talking about the love story behind the lens and what it means to look back. Shelley, welcome to the show.
Oh, Judy, thank you so much for having me. This is such a big week for me because the book just was launched on Thursday, and all my favorite people in the world were in the room together, including you. And it was just, I haven't quite come down from it.
It was quite the launch. I mean, it was a who's who. It was downtown, probably one of the coldest nights of the year, and yet everybody turned out. Anna Marie Tremonti from CBC was your host. I looked into the crowd. Lisa LaFlamme was there. The other, other journalists, broadcasters, and then so many people in the film industry were there. Like this was really cool.
It was so cool. And it felt like, I mean, I'm going to use the analogy because I've just done a book, but it felt like all the chapters of my life were there. So like my best friend from grade one was there. She used to come home with me for lunch because her mom was working and my mom at that time had a little baby. Things like that, and then she marries this wonderful author, Antanas Thaleka, and he was there and he wrote one of the blurbs for my book. And they're best friends with Anne Collins, who's my editor. And so because I was so overwhelmed, I was thrilled because it was like a big reunion for everyone. Lise Doucet of the BBC, and I'm not trying to name drop, but she's one of my dearest friends, was supposed to be going to Iran that morning. She's
Wow.
there today.
Mm,
She decided to fly into Toronto for my launch. She
mm.
stayed for literally 48 hours and got back on a plane. And, I felt such joy and love in that room because we all have gone through so much together. And it just felt like this connection to just incredible
Yeah,
stories and
great
people.
vibes, great vibes. Now, okay, so that's the setup. So let's tell people what this book is about. Go ahead, give everyone the story.
I was privileged, amazingly privileged as a child and then a teenager to spend time in Asia. My dad taught Chinese political history at U of T. He took a sabbatical when I was 12 and 13. We lived in Hong Kong. And then 4 years later, he was asked to be the Canadian embassy in Beijing was just opening. You have to remember this was the Cultural Revolution. No foreigners had really been in the country. And my father spoke Chinese, so Pierre Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau at the time, asked my dad to go and work at the embassy. And I was, in this situation where I was finishing high school and the Canadian government said, we will pay you to go to a boarding school anywhere in the world. And I thought, well, I don't want to leave Asia. I mean, this is just like a dream to be back in Asia. So, to my amazement, there was this international school in Kobe, Japan, with the name Canadian Academy.
Mhm.
Ding, ding, ding. Okay, that's where I'm going to go. Uh, because you've read the book, Jude, like I was the only Canadian.
Mhm.
I think it had been started in the 1920s, if I've got my facts right. It's in the book, but by some Canadian missionaries. But it had changed and grown, and it was an international school. And so you asked me about the book, so I'm getting there. But
Of
um,
course.
But so on the first, so we went to Beijing and I had this amazing time with my family there. And then I traveled by myself to Kobe, Japan. And I had just turned 17. And the thing is, it doesn't sound like a big deal to travel by yourself, but in those days, China was completely cut off from the rest of the world. So it meant going through China to the border, which was quite the scenario. It was a 2 day trip on my
Mm.
own by train to the border. We walked across the border. Hong Kong was then a British colony. It no longer is. And into Hong Kong and then waited for a flight to Osaka and then this drive to Kobe, where I arrived very late at night, not knowing where the hell I was. And I had never been in a boarding school before. So this was a group of kids who'd essentially been all together for 4 years. And I was the new girl. And so the first day of school after class, I'm wandering around trying to get my bearings. And I see this boy, and he's sitting on the front steps of this school. And I literally stop in my tracks because he looks up and he's smiling at me. And that was it for me. I was done. I fell so in love so fast and so hard.
Wow.
I didn't know what had hit me. And he's smiling at me. And just at that moment, this girl walks past me and into his arms. And I thought,
No.
I realized he wasn't smiling at me at all. He was smiling at her. Anyway, it's the beginning of this crazy love story that shaped my life because it's all in the book. But that entire year in Japan was about having the biggest crush and all the agonies of that I think many of us can relate to, that high school crush that's like you think you're going to die. And, everything that's said, every exchange is painful and crazy. But of course, I don't think this is a spoiler. We do end up together.
Well, from that time,
That's the beginning of the book.
okay, and from that time, tell folks from the time that you saw him, how long was it until you guys finally were a couple? And then you broke up and didn't see each other for 30 years. So how long were you actually together as a couple in Japan before you split up?
So that, I mean, that this is like such the theme of the book. Not very long. We finally kind of confessed our feelings to each other about the last month of school. And then it was like full on, mad, crazy, passionate, everything,
Mm-hmm.
romantic love. And then we parted because we were both we both graduated, and he who had, by the way, his name was Daniel Peterson, and
Hmm.
he had been born and raised in Shikoku in Japan,
Okay.
American missionary parents, and he was about to head off to college in the US. And I was heading back to Beijing and then to Canada. And so we only had this month together, but I mean, for me, it was like the whole year too, because I was in love with him from day one. But the last month was extraordinarily romantic. It's all in the book, guys. But anyway, he chose Ann Arbor, Michigan, to be close to me because I was going to be back in Toronto. And he shows up on my doorstep for a visit after we'd spent the summer apart, and that didn't go well. And that I hope people can relate to because it was too many worlds colliding. I just got back
Mm.
to Canada, was seeing all my friends. I was living again with my parents. It was just so pathetic now when I think about it. But so then we didn't have a great week together, to say the least. And he stormed off, and we spent 29 years apart.
Oh no.
And the thing is, um, in those days there was no internet. We literally lost each other because probably for 1 year. I think I tried writing him and apologizing, and obviously I didn't really think it was over.
Because he
But
was living in the States, right?
he
He's
was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I mean, he
right.
was close. It was like a $25 bus ticket, but you have your pride and da da da. Anyway,
Course.
so th- then I got a letter back, sender unknown, lost, and I mean, he had a common surname, Peterson. He could have been anywhere in the US. Our
Sure.
friends were from an international school, so everyone had spread out. The grapevine lasted for a bit. And then, so I really did lose him for 29 years and went on to live my life, and he lived his. But
how did you, after 29 years, how did you actually connect?
well, it was 2002. And for those who remember, it was the beginning of Facebook. But Facebook actually wasn't online yet. But just before that, things were starting to happen. And there was this site called classmates.com. And somebody said, I don't know how I found it, but I was a documentary filmmaker and I was a researcher. And, I did actually try to find him over many years at many, many times. But, I didn't know where he was. I didn't know what city he was in or what career he had chosen. I didn't have a lot of clues. So I didn't find him. And then this classmates.com came online, and you had to pay $25 to put your name in your class. So I went on, and he wasn't there in our graduating class. But there were other very, very special people to me who were. So that began this 6 months of love-ins with like my roommate, Celia, people I had also lost. But
Mm,
no, Daniel. And to further complicate the story, I knew Daniel as Pete in Japan.
mm,
Pete was that's what we all called him. It was Pete
okay.
for Peterson. So in my mind, he was still Pete. So I didn't, it was very disappointing. He wasn't on Classmates. But because I'd signed up, if anyone new signed up, you got an email. So one night, it was a Saturday night, I'm in my study. I'm finishing a script for one of my docs. It's my deadline. It's late. It's cold. I'm ready to go out for dinner with my dear friend Kirsten and her late partner Susan. And I'm shutting everything down. I just thought, oh, I'll check my emails. And there was this email that said, Shelley, you have a new classmate. And I literally bolted out of my chair.
Mm.
It was, I don't know really even how to describe it, even though I've written a whole book about it. But the thing is, it felt like I'd put my hand in an electric socket. And that was before I clicked on and knew it was actually him. I just knew.
So what was his first email to you? What did he say?
He said, no, mine to him was, I didn't mince words. I just said, Pete, it's Shelley. Where have you been for 29 years? Write me. I didn't say, if you remember me, write me, or could you please write? I was like, write me. It was a command. I
Mhm.
go out for dinner. I come back late that night and all in a state. And I climb up to my attic and turn on my computer, and there he is. And, it was, solving, I like to say, a 10,000 day mystery.
Mm.
Because he just starts off by, I don't know where to start. The best place is usually the beginning. And he just writes sort of this truncated version of where he had been and what had happened to him. And I was reading it like in gulps, you can imagine.
Of
I mean,
course.
of course, I reread it several times that night, but the first time I was just scanning for the word, which was divorce,
Mm.
because that was already, I don't know, just the minute I saw that he was divorced, I kind of exhaled, and then I went back and
Right.
read it over and over again. And then we began this 7 month exchange of writing each other.
And these emails are in the book, and it's fantastic to sort of follow how you guys eventually end up together after that 7 month period. But the emails are beautiful. The way you structure the book is beautiful. So let's cut to now. 7 months of emailing back and forth happens. Then what? Then you get together?
So yeah, so there's reasons, and it's all in the book about why we waited so long that are pertinent, but I don't want to give everything away.
No, of course not.
I had to go to Iraq to make a film,
Right?
and so I come back, and he's and also in Iraq, there was no internet at the time. I mean, we were totally blacked out for a month, and I was being ridiculously teased by my crew of many years, who were, like, seriously, Shell, you haven't seen this guy for 29 years, because I was already there. I was already like, yeah, this
Yep.
he's the one. We're gonna meet, and and they're just killing me with, you didn't, and we didn't exchange photos. And I don't know why, but we were just so in love with each other's words at that point. And
Sure.
somehow, I mean, I still saw him as that 17-year-old. And probably, I'm sure that's how he saw me. And we didn't really, I don't know. So anyway, he sends me a ticket, and he's now living in Utah of all places, because he has become a conservator, an art restorator, and the governor's mansion there has burned down or been destroyed by a fire, and he's been there for months, restoring it, and that's where he is. And he sends me a ticket, and I had a good friend of mine who, Kirsten, drive me to the airport and give me a Valium. So ironic, given that had gone to every war zone going and never needed a Valium. I'm sure Sarah did on that trip. And then um, we meet at the airport, and it's like time vanishes. Time vanished. Like
Oh.
I mean, it just was exactly what I expected.
So you meet at the airport, the sparks go off again after 30 years, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens?
Well, about 3 days into that trip, he said, "Marry me." He
Wow.
didn't ask. He just said, "Marry me." And I said, "Of course. Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes, yes." Channeling
wow.
Yoko Ono here, but yes. And and that was that. But we did have a long distance relationship for many years, because
Right.
he was American. He had his business. I had my own business. I had deadlines. He had deadlines. He was
Sure.
working in a lot on a lot of big projects, even outside of the States. So we kept, having these crazy weeks together. I'd go down there, or he'd come up to Toronto, or I one summer I took my research and spent 3 months. Like, we were so in love, none of that mattered. But eventually, um, and I don't know if I should say this, but politics decided it,
Okay.
because, you know, George Bush was the president of the States, and we had
Mm.
Jean Chrétien, and we were like, okay, we want to be in Canada. um, anyway, and he fell in love with Toronto, and he loved the Asian culture in Toronto, and the diversity, and we just had this amazing life together, um, until things changed again.
And can we talk about things
Yes.
changing?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell folks, so how long are you married at this point before things change?
So we were married in 2004. I believe it was 10 years. 10
Married
years.
for 10 years. Okay.
And, a lot of those years we were apart, but we were always together. And then, I mean, to explain to you that we were often apart, he had moved, we got a condo in DC because he had this huge project in the US Senate, restoring 5-year project.
Hmm.
And I was as busy as I've ever been on my docs. And so we were back and forth between DC and Toronto. And I was about to leave for Italy on a holiday without him, because I had just finished 2 docs. It was August. My brother has a place in Italy, he and his husband, and Daniel had to be in DC because the Senate was out in August, and that's when they could really make time on their deadline. And so I flew to Italy, and I got there, and the very day I arrived, he phoned me with like a devastating diagnosis. We learned he had stage 4 lung cancer, and he didn't. The last, um, the diagnosis was just, it was so late and it was so extreme
Mm.
when they found it that, I mean, we both flew back to Toronto that day. I mean, I just turned around from Italy and flew home. He
Mm.
flew from DC. We met and went straight to the hospital from the airport. And the next 10 months were all about um, helping him through the end of his life.
Mm.
And in fact, you know, this book evolved out of journals that I wrote during those 10 months. And I mean, the only thing I knew how to do besides love him was try and hide my own grief, which happens. Anyone who's gone through this, and I know a lot of people have, the minute you hear that diagnosis, you're already in grief.
Mhm.
But it, you know, and it wasn't me that was sick. And I had to try and hide it from him, which I didn't do particularly well
Mm.
because he knew me intimately. But I think I describe in the book the intimacy that, you know, you think you're so intimate with the person you love, and you are in every way, but illness and death is a whole other level of it.
Of course.
Um, and when I was starting to write, basically because it's all I knew how to do when he was sick and when he died, I was writing it in such a strange way, Jude, because I was like, all right, I'm gonna um, I remember this from Japan, or I found our emails and I started reading them again. And that took me, you know, my mind was so mixed up. And I was trying to grasp what had happened. And I was so lost. And really, the writing saved me. And his words saved me again, because
Mm.
he was alive in those emails and he was alive in my memory. So that's where I hung out. Like when it got really hard, which was all the time, I
Mm.
would just go into, you know, it could have been, you know, any number of things. I found you know, he was a musician. I found a guitar pick on the floor, or it could be a song that was on the radio, you know, or it could be anything would take me into these stories. And so when I began to put this together as a book, really for me, I never thought of publishing it. Um, it jumps around between Japan at 17 and the first email and the illness. Like, I don't tell it in a linear way, because that's not how the brain functions, and that's not certainly how it mind functioned during grief. So that is the state of, was the book, I think, captures the state of mind that you're in when you're in grief. But I also didn't want it to be a book about grief. I wanted it to be a book about love, and a great love story, which is very joyful. And
It's a
so,
great, I will tell you, Shelley, it is a fantastic love story, but it is also a real, and I'm sure when you started doing documentaries, you never thought you would be the person writing a book about getting through grief. But I think people have reached out to you just sort of sharing their stories about grief, because nobody has the official how do you go from A to B? But the way that you describe what happened to you and Daniel, it's just a very honest, a very raw sort of guideline in a way, you know? And so you have had people reach out to you, readers who have said that they've been through similar. What have they said to you?
well, the book was put out by Penguin Random House on an early reader thing in the States. So I've been, you know, getting notes from people I don't know, which has been wonderful, and Facebook messages, both about their love stories and also about their loss stories. And you don't really feel grief unless you've really experienced love in a way. So they're very entwined. Um, I just had one this morning, and she said, "I can't stop thinking about your book. I read it in 2 nights and talked about the book, but then she said, there's so many layers that I relate to that I want to tell you about." Um, and so this actually brings me joy because I feel like I never wanted to navel gaze, and I never wanted anyone to feel like my story was that I was promoting my own story. I wanted it to feel universal. And so getting these stories back from people, that's what I've done my whole life. I'm a storyteller.
Hmm.
I gather stories, and now they're starting to come in. And someone said to me the other night, you should make a documentary about the people's stories that come out of this book.
Definitely.
So it's feeling there's a feeling of connectedness, both from people that I haven't seen or heard of for years, like people who went to that school in Japan in different years who didn't know me or writing me. So there's this thing that's happening that's really interesting. And I want to go back to the point you made about there's no handbook for grief.
Mhm.
And everyone experiences it differently. And I had made these films for years where people were in trauma and they were telling me the most horrific things and opening up to me. And it was such a precious, sacred space. And even though I thought I knew about grief, I believed I was very empathetic until you're in it, you know, there's no way that you know how you will be. And I remember just feeling so lost. And I was looking for guideposts everywhere. And one of the first ones I had was from my dearest friend Zazie, who was at school with us in Japan. She's my closest friend. And I phoned her, or she phoned me right after the diagnosis. And I said, Zai, I can't see ahead. Everything's black. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And she said, just love him. And, you know, loving somebody that you love is as easy as breathing. That comment saved me because suddenly I knew how to be in the situation. I knew how to be with him. And even after he was gone, I still knew how to be with him because that one word, rather than being the source of my pain, became the source of healing, I guess. And there's many other examples of people giving me guideposts in the book. And all of us are different, as you've said and I've said, but there's a sense of being lost. And I remember people would say, how are you? And I'd say lost. And they thought I was saying lost. And they'd say, well, of course, you've had this loss. And I said, no, I'm lost. And
Mm.
so it's finding your way back to yourself and finding your next chapter and taking a heart that feels crushed and just, what's amazing to me is it just keeps growing. Like I've met you since then. I've met so many wonderful people since then who I love and who are part of my life now. So it doesn't stop. That's what I've learned.
Can I ask you, where did the title come from? By the way, folks, again, I'm chatting with Shelley Saywell. She's just written a powerful memoir that is one of Heather's picks, and it's called If Only Love. And again, this story is, as the Indigo website describes the book, a 17-year-old Canadian girl meets an American boy. First day of school in Japan, they fall in love, not realizing that he's also totally mad for her. When they finally connect, they have 2 months together before school's out. She has to head home. Bad timing and swirling emotion botches their attempt to stay together. And 30 years later, they connect again. So again, I want to ask you, where did the title If Only Love comes from?
Well, I had a working title which was imprinted because we imprinted on each other at 17. We just did. Um, so that was the title for ages. But when Anne Collins, the amazing editor of my dreams, called me to say she wanted the book, she said, I'm not sure about the title. And and I wasn't I, I was fine with changing it. But then we went through this agonizing list of titles. And there was this song that I had played over and over and over again that summed up the way I felt about him and the way I felt when we reconnected. And it's a Sheryl Crow's song. She's one of my favorite singer-songwriters in the world. And the song goes, "If only love comes round again, it will have been worth the ride."
Mm.
And I just realized one day that's the title because there's so many if onlys in it. It's just our story.
Do you think that you would have been as, and you didn't mean to be a guide on the road to grief, but do you think you would have been as good at it as you were if you didn't do documentaries for all the years leading up to this?
Wow. That's a really good question. I've never thought about that. I wrote the book almost in a meditation.
Mm.
I wasn't thinking about anybody reading it, and I wasn't thinking about publishing it. And I wasn't, all the years in film, I had to go pitch stories, raise money. There's a whole process in that industry. And I was lucky because I made films I cared about and wanted to make, but all of that was gone with this project. I'm sure some of the skills that I learned over many years in docs guided my hand in being comfortable enough to try and tell this story. And I said to myself, I've asked people for years to open up to me. I've asked them to trust me and tell me their most intimate things. And if I am going to write this book, I have to be completely honest. I have to dig deep. I I have to go places that might feel uncomfortable, um, because it's only by doing that that it'll be true. And so I think I sort of turned, um, in a way, not the camera exactly, but if I use that analogy, the camera back on myself and said, okay, I owe it to myself and others to give in this book what all those people have given me, and just put the story out there. We're all about our stories. That's especially one thing I was worried about was in this world where, there's so much pain right now and there's so many stories I can't even
Mm.
read. Did it feel frivolous in a way to put out a book about love? But I think now the opposite, because what I'm getting back from people is this is exactly what I needed to read right
Definitely.
now, right now. And then my final little thought is a friend of mine said, Shell, I just got an email from the guy that got away. And she was telling me this was like very, very recently. And I said, and she said, what should I do? And I said, do not miss this chance.
Mm.
That's really one of the big messages of the book. Don't worry about what might happen. Don't worry about, we can't control any of it. Like,
Exactly.
be true to your heart, because when you get a second chance, grab it. At least find out.
At least find out. Again, the book is If Only Love. The author is the fantastic Shelley Saywell. You want to get in contact with Shelley Saywell, you can go to her website, shelleysaywell.com. I will include the link in this interview. If you want to buy the book, If Only Love, again, it's one of Heather's picks. It's at indigo.ca. Check it out. It's a fantastic, fantastic read. Shelley, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you.